Here we are. We're live. Hello again, everybody. Let me just see now. Do we have people joining us? Oh, look, we've already got a hello. Hello from Paris. Hello, Albert. Hi, Tom. Oh, yes. People are coming. Yeah. This is good. We've got 27. We'll just give them a few minutes. Let's wait and see if we get a few more. Anyway, I'm here as usual with Eleanor kicking it off. And Eleanor, what are you doing for us today?
So today we're doing Picket, which is using mobile pickers. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the Rate It app that we did a couple of months ago, which is the one with the movie reviews, and we're going to add some mobile controls to that to make the user experience a bit nicer on mobile. So we'll be using mobile pick photo, mobile pick date, just mobile pick for choosing from a list of options. And we'll also be adding a mobile scroller, which is not a picker, admittedly, but it's a useful mobile control. So we're going to have a look at adding a mobile scroller to our list of reviews so that we can scroll through them.
That sounds very useful. Lots of people keep asking me about mobile scrollers. So
yeah, good. I think mobile scrollers are the one that people are interested in. So I thought I'd
yeah,
it's not a picker.
Oh, look, we've got New Orleans, Plymouth, Atlanta, and Luxembourg coming in. So this is all good. It's great. Okay. All right. Well, I think yep. Take it away, Eleanor. Let's get going.
So I'll just start off the first video for you. Here we go. And as always, we'll do some questions and answers in between the videos. So if you've got any questions, you can either pop them in the chat and we will have a look at them after this video before the next one. Great.
So in this session, we'll be looking at some ways that we can improve the user experience of the Rate It app that we made a couple of months ago. And we'll be doing that using mobile pickers and native mobile controls. So we'll be looking at different types of pickers that we can use and different types of native mobile controls that we can use just to improve the experience, particularly on mobile. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to look at using a mobile picker to pick a photo from the library on the phone. We'll be doing that on the Add Edit card, so we want to move to that card. So you can do it from run mode. You can just click on the Add button and that'll take you to the card. Or of course you could use the project browser to move you directly to the Add Edit film card, which is the one that we want to be on. So what we'll do is we'll allow the user, when they click on Choose Image here, to choose a picture on desktop. That'd just be from their file system. From mobile, we can allow them to choose it from their photo library. Okay, so make sure that you've got Select Grouped turned off because we've got a group here. So that's the border and the image control. So we want Select Grouped off. So go into Edit mode, select the group, and open up the object script for the group. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a mouse up handler here so that when the user clicks on the group, we will allow them to select an image. So in here, we're just going to call a command select poster, which will then implement on the card script. So go to the card script. And I've already got an empty select poster command here, but just add it to your card script. So the first thing we're going to do is check whether we are on mobile or desktop. So say if the environment is mobile, then. And this is because we have different ways of selecting an image on mobile and on desktop. So on mobile, what we want to do is we're going to use the mobile pick photo command. And we want them to choose it from their library. So we want to choose it from the saved photos on their device. Now with the mobile pick photo command, you can also use the camera, you can choose the front or back camera, you can choose from albums. But in this case, it's not a case where we'd want somebody to be able to take a picture necessarily. If you wanted them to be able to take a picture to associate with the film, that's fine. It could be a picture of the ticket or something else. But in this case, we're going to have them choose from their photo library. And what this will do is this will create a new image on the card. So what we want to do is we want to set the area of the new image to the area of our image sort of area that we have marked out here. So we set the rect of the last image, that'll be of the new image. And we want to set that to the rect of image poster, which is the image that we have in our group here. And that will just mean that they take up the same space on the card. Okay, so although we've created a new image, it will take up the same space. We're then going to set the name of the last image to selected poster. And we do this because when we create a new image in this way, or if we drag it on, it'll be called image ID 2000 or whatever, so we want to give it a name so that we can refer to it later in code. And then what we want to do is we want to hide this label here, this choose image label, because once we've selected an image, we don't want to show that label anymore. So we hide field poster label. And now we want to do the equivalent for desktop. So on desktop, what we want to do is we want to show an answer dialog, a file picker answer dialog. So we say answer file, choose an image. Then we want to see if make sure that the user didn't click cancel. So we say if the result is not cancel. So if they have selected an image, then we want to put that into a variable. So we put it into tImagePath. I'll just declare that at the top. So local tImagePath. Then what we want to do is we want to set the file name of our poster image. So that's the one that's already on the card. So we want to set that to the selected file. And then as before, we want to hide field poster label. Okay, so let's apply that. So we'll check it on desktop first. We click on our image here. If I go to the desktop, then I've got a Blade Runner poster there. So that works fine on desktop. Now we want to test it on mobile. So open up the standalone application settings, go to iOS, you'll see that it's called Pickit. I've got my app ID set, I've got some icons here, that all looks fine. So what we'll do is we'll just go to the development menu, choose Test Target iPhone Simulator and choose Test. Okay, so that's opened up on our simulator now. So if we go to Add, then click on Choose Image, we'll allow it to pick from our photos. And you'll see here I've already got some images here, and there's the Blade Runner poster.
Okay, so great.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was saying great. That seemed to work very well.
Okay, so that's our first type of picker, which is the photo picker. So we've got a question here from Mark. On desktop, do you need to set the rect of the image? Now on desktop, you don't need to because there's already an image control on the card and it has its lock location set to true. So if you, on desktop, when you pick the file and then set the file name, if the image is not locked, if the lock location is off, then it will automatically resize to the size of the image that you selected. But if you've got the lock set to true, then it will scale down into the size of the image. So because on desktop we're using a control that's already there and we've got the size locked, then we don't need to do anything with it. The difference is that on mobile it actually creates a new image. So after that image has been created, and it'll be created at the native size of the image that you chose from your library, then in order to fit it into the little part of the card that we've sort of allocated to showing the image, then we need to resize it just because it's a new image rather than using the image control that's already on there. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that explains that. We'll give it a couple of minutes and see if we've got any other questions about the mobile pick photo, and then we can go on to our next video. I'll just have a quick scroll through the chat and check that we don't have any other questions in here. I don't think we do. I think that was the only one for this part. So I'll just queue up the video for the next section of the lesson.
The next type of picker we're going to look at is a mobile date picker, which will allow the user to choose the date they saw a film. So in the original app, in the Rate It app, we just used a field here for the date watched, and we'll continue to do that on desktop. But on mobile, we're going to use a mobile text picker control. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add some code to our date watched field. So make sure you're in edit mode, select the date watched field, and open up the object script. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a mouse up handler here. And from here, we're going to check if the environment is mobile. And if it is, we're going to call the select date watched command. Now this is because we only have the date picker on mobile. If you want to use a nice date picker on desktop, then you could have a look at the calendar widget, which we used as a training course, a widget course in the last sort of live conference that we had in Edinburgh. So what I'll do is I'll make the source for that widget available in case anybody's interested in using that. As it stands, on desktop we'll just use a normal field to allow the user to type into, and on mobile we'll use this mobile picker. And so now we need to implement our select date watched command. So we'll open up the card script and we'll just put it after the select poster. We'll have command select date watched. And again, what we're going to do here is we're going to use a mobile picker, but this time we're going to use mobile pick date. And we want to use a date picker. You can also have a time picker or a date and time picker. Have a look at the dictionary entry to see all the different types of mobile pick date you can use. And next what we want to do is we want to check whether the user picked a date or chose cancel. So we say if the result is cancel, so if they've chosen to cancel the date picker, we want to put the default value into the field. So we set the text of field date watched to the default value for date watched. And if they didn't cancel, so if they did pick a date, then we put the result into field date watched. So now when you click on the date watched field, if you're on mobile, it'll pop up a date picker. If you cancel it, it'll put choose date or whatever the default value date watched is back into the field, and if you choose a date, it'll put the date in here. So if anybody wasn't here when we did the Rate It app, the default value is just a function that returns the default value to put into these fields if they're empty or when you're opening up the field. So if we have a look at that, so if the field is date watched, then we return date watched. If it's title, we return enter title. Director, we return enter director, and that just means when we're setting up the field for the first time, or if any of the values are empty, we can just put a default value in here so the user knows what these fields represent. So now the final thing we need to do to get this all working is we need to update our pre-open card handler. So we go to our pre-open card handler, and the reason that we need to do this is because a field will only get a mouse up message. So we've added a mouse up handler to our field, but a field only gets a mouse up message if it is locked, so if the text of the field is locked. Otherwise you'll get an open field message or an enter field message, so you only get mouse up if the field is locked. So what we have to do is in pre-open card we have to make sure that if we're on mobile we lock that field, and if we're on desktop we unlock the field. So in pre-open card here we are setting up the entry controls. So if the environment is mobile, then if the C watched of card is 1, so that means that if we are adding a film that we've already watched, then we want to show field date watched, and we want to set the lock text of that field to true. And so that means that because we're adding a field that we've already seen, we'll be able to see the date watched field, and on mobile we'll have that lock text set to true, so when we click on it we'll get the date picker. Now if the C watched of the card is not 1, so if we're adding a film to our watch list, a film that we want to watch, then we haven't seen it yet, so we don't want to see the date watched field because we don't have a date for that yet. So in that case we hide field date watched. And because it's hidden, it doesn't matter if it's locked or unlocked. So now we come down here, so in the else, so we're now on desktop. And again, we want to do the same thing. So we want to show the field date watched, but in this case, we want the user to be able to type into it. So we have to set the lock text of field date watched to false. So when the lock text is false, it's not locked, and the user can click in it and start typing. And similarly, if we're adding a film to our watch list, so a film that we want to see, then we'll hide field date watched. So because we're picking this up from our Rate It app, if you weren't at that lesson, you can always go back and have a look at the that particular lesson. The Rate It app was mostly about learning about using an SQLite database to store information, and we used the film database as an example for that. So anything that we're going over here is because we're building on top of that app. Okay, so let's try that now. Let's save, and we'll just check that when we go in, so we're on desktop, so we'll go away from this card and we'll come back to it. So if I click on the date watched field, you'll see that I can type in there because I'm on desktop. And now what we'll do again is we will test it on the simulator. So if we go to add, now hopefully because this field is locked, when we click on it, what we'll get is we'll get a date picker. So I'll put a different date in here, so October the 7th, done, and you'll see we now have the date in the field. Of course, if I'd cancelled it, then it would empty the field and put date watched back in.
Okay, so that was the second video, so that's using mobile pick date. So just have a quick look at the comments here. So Jim has pointed out that it's probably a good idea to check for cancel after mobile pick photo, and that's a good point actually. That's something that I missed, so what I'll do is I'll update the slides and the resources with checking for cancel after mobile pick photo. It'll be similar. You can check for cancel, and if it's cancelled, then you would show the field that says choose picture or choose image again. And if it's not cancelled, then you do what we do. So yes, it's always a good idea to check if the user has actually cancelled a picker. And Bob has asked, is the mobile control iOS and Android? Yes, the ones that we're using here, they're all iOS and Android. They're just general mobile pickers. Not all of the options are available on both of them. So I think with the camera control front, if you want to choose the front camera or the back camera, they're iOS only, but everything else is cross-platform. You can just have a look at the dictionary entry to see what options are available on each one. They're not completely parallel. They don't have all the same options just because there's different options available on iOS and Android, but all these controls are cross-platform. So obviously on Android, on Android it would look like an Android picker. They're native controls, so they'll actually use the native pickers on the device that they're running on. So if we don't have any other questions, what I'll maybe just quickly do, because we've not got a lot of questions, we've got quite a bit of time today, is I mentioned the calendar widget as something you could use as a date picker on desktop. So I've included it in the resources for this lesson in case anybody wants to use it, because there isn't a date picker on desktop. So I can quickly show you how to actually install that if you want to use it. So I'll do that now. I'll just turn on my screen sharing. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. So
I can see the screen, yeah.
Great. Okay, so in the Pickit resources, which you can download from the link, there's a calendar widget folder. And in there's a library and a widget. So the calendar widget actually uses a library to do all the date calculations, working out checking how many days are in the month of a particular year for February, and working out what day of the month, what day of the week each month starts on, things like that. So the library just allows the calendar to work sort of indefinitely. You can go as many months forward or back as you want to. So to install it, we'll just start up LiveCode. Let me just hide this bar, which I can't get to my LiveCode icon from. And the version that I've included is the, I've just included the LiveCode Builder source files. I haven't built the extension, and I've just done it that way because it depends what version of LiveCode you're using, whether you're using an 8 version or a 9 version. They have slightly different module packaging. So I've just included the LCB because then you don't need to worry about which module you're installing. So if you're going to install a widget from the LiveCode Builder source, and you can also have a look at the LiveCode Builder source, and you might be interested in making any changes to it. So we've got that there as well. So if you go to the Tools menu and open up the extension Builder, this lets you build from a source file. So just choose from the picker, and we need to install the library first because the widget relies on it. So you go to the library folder and choose datesupport.lcb, and then we'll open that. And we're just going to use the install button to install it. We don't need any icons for a library. And then you'll hear the sound that shows you, that lets you know that that's installed. And then we're going to install the widget. So again, we choose the file, go into the widget folder this time, choose calendar.lcb, open that, and then again, we'll just choose install. Now we can pick icon files if we want to. So there are a couple included here. So we've got the small one and then the large one. And you'll see here that it's shown up in my tools palette, and that's the icon. The icons are just SVG files. So that's my calendar widget. So now, if I create a new stack, I can just drag it on from the tools palette. I can move forward and back through the months. There's some properties here, so you can choose the day names. So you could choose those to be displayed in your own language. If you're not, if you don't want to use English, you could change the display names, which are just the labels that are shown up here. Same for the month names, you could change those to another language. And you can choose the highlight style of the selected date to be background or text. So if we choose text and then choose a date here, you'll see that the date changes color. And we can have a look at the selected date property of the calendar, which gives you back the selected date in the form year, month, day. So if you wanted to include a nice date picker in a desktop app, you could use something like the calendar widget that we have here. Okay, so let me come back to the main turn screen.
Have we slightly lost Eleanor? Are you there, Eleanor? I don't see you. I don't see you. Not quite sure what's happened here. Okay, let's
Okay, so next we're going to use a sort of more generic type picker, so just a list picker, and we'll use that to allow the user to choose a venue. So I've already got this set up. So on desktop, to choose a venue, we're going to use a pull down menu, so one of these. So if I select it here, you'll see that it's actually a button called venue menu. Here are my menu items. I've just set those up and I've just hard coded those in. If you wanted to, you could have these included in a venues table in your database or something else, but for simplicity's sake, we've just set up this menu with these menu items, so just 3 items here. And so if I show you how that works, when you click on it, it just pops up a list for you. And similarly, what we'll do when we get to mobile is we'll do something similar to date watch. So we'll use a field to actually display chosen value, but when the user clicks on that field, they'll get a mobile picker with the options in it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to implement the code for our choose venue button. So this is for the desktop. So there is actually a button and a field. So in this case, we're looking at the button. So select the button and open up the object script. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to handle the menu pick message, which is the message that gets sent when you choose an item from a menu, and it gets the choice as well. So it gets the choice as a parameter. And all we want to do is we want to set the label of button venue menu, which is quite hard to say, venue menu, to pChoice. And what this will do is this will set the label of the button to the item that the user chose. So to try that, we'll click on choose venue and we'll choose the cameo, and you'll see that the label of the button is now the cameo. So the label is whatever is displayed here, and the menu items here are the options. So to show the option that was chosen, you just update the label of the button. Now on mobile, we want to do something similar to what we did with the date watched field. So on mobile, we'll hide the button, we'll show the field, and when the user clicks on the field, we'll pop up the mobile picker. So just to quickly show you, it's already implemented, but if we have a look at the pre-open card handler, you'll see that when we're on mobile, we're checking to see if the film has been watched, and if it has been, then we hide our button venue menu and we show our field venue. If it's not been watched, we hide them both. If we're in the else, if we're on desktop, then we show the button and hide the field, and similarly, if it hasn't been watched and we're on desktop, we hide them both. So we're just using a field to click on mobile and a button to do the selection on desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the button. So open up the inspector for the button and I'm going to make that invisible. And then in the message box, I'm just going to show the field venue. Because we're on desktop, it's automatically been hidden, but to work with it, we want to be able to see it. So now select the field and open up the object script for the field. Now similarly to the date, we're going to do on mouse up. This is a locked field, so it will get a mouse up message. And we're going to call the select venue command from there. So we say select venue. And then we'll switch back to our card script and we'll add a select venue command. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a local variable tResult to store the result from the picker. And this time what we're going to do is we're just going to call mobile pick. So not mobile pick photo or mobile pick date, just mobile pick. And we're going to pass it the text of button venue menu. So if you remember when we had a look at the menu items in the button, it was a return separated list of venues. So we're just going, so that's what mobile pick takes. So if you want just a generic picker, just to pick from a list, you pass it in the first parameter, you pass it a list of options, one per line, and we'll just be using the text of button venue menu. And then what we'll say is we'll put the result into tResult. So what menu pick does is menu pick gives you back a number in the result, and it's 0 if it's been cancelled, and it's the line number of the chosen option if you've chosen one. So we say if the result is 0, so meaning if the user chose cancel. So if they chose cancel, we're going to set the text of the venue field to the default value. So we set the text of field venue, the default, and we want to set that to the default value for venue. And again, that will just call that function that returns the default value. And otherwise, what we want to do is we want to set the text of the field to the chosen option. But of course, what we've got is, in the result, we've got a line number. So what we need to do is we need to set the text of field venue. And we want it to set it to line tResult of the text of button venue. So if you choose the second option in the list, you'll get back 2 as the result, and we want to put line 2 of the text of button venue menu into our field. And remember, when we popped it up, we used the text of button venue menu, and here we're just checking again against that to get the actual value rather than just the line number. Okay, so let's apply that and we'll test that on the simulator again. Okay, so now if we go to add, if we click on choose venue, then you'll see that we get a picker here. If we click on done, we get the cameo. If we do it again and we click cancel, then we get our default value. So if you want just a general picker, just for choosing from a list of options, so not a date, not a photo, none of those specific things, just a list of options, then you can just use mobile pick and pass it a list of the options you want the user to be able to choose from.
Oh, you're back.
I don't think that reached the end.
I'm not sure. I think, well, folks, did you see that go to the end? I think you may have done. I think our audio was out of sync.
Okay. So sorry that I disappeared earlier. I think it happened after I stopped sharing my screen. But we just had one question, which was, does the calendar do a week view? And the calendar widget as it stands doesn't do week view, it just does that month by month view. But that's certainly something that you could add if you felt like learning a bit of LiveCode Builder or trying something out. You could have a look at the source for the calendar, and you could add a property, which will show up in the property inspector, that maybe allows the user to choose whether they want to do week or month or even year view. So you could always add something like that yourself. We do have a free widget course, which you can find if you go to the LiveCode website and then go to resources and then there go to learning. And there's the widget course. I think it's down near the bottom of the list at the moment, but that's a free one. So if you're interested in learning a bit of LiveCode Builder and writing some widgets, then you could always have a look at that and maybe use the calendar as a jumping off point. Okay, so I don't know if we have any other questions from the video we just watched, which is just how to do a general picker that just allows the user to pick from a list. And we don't have any in the chat at the moment, so I guess we can just go ahead and start the last video, which is the one about the mobile scroller.
Now the last feature we're going to add is to allow scrolling on our list of all reviews. Now this isn't a picker, but it's a native mobile control, so hopefully it will still be useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to our list of all reviews. Now we're not going to do the recent one, because for the recent one we only ever show 10, and those should always fit on our list here without needing scrolling. But we might have more reviews than that, we might need to be able to scroll. So what to do is make sure you're on the all reviews card and open up the card script. Now at the moment in here all we do is get the list of all reviews from the database and then set the text of the field to that list. Now if that list is too long we don't have any way of scrolling it. And again we need to do this slightly differently on desktop and mobile. On desktop it's easy, we'll just turn on a scroll bar for the field. On mobile we'll need to create a mobile scroller. Okay, so let's do our check to see if we're on desktop or mobile. So if the environment is mobile, okay, and we'll do desktop first just because it's a little simpler. So all we're going to do is we're going to check if we need a scroll bar by checking the formatted height of the field against the actual height of the field. So if we have a look at our field here, you'll see that the height is 454, but actually if you get the formatted height, that gives you the height of the content of the field rather than the height of the field object. So if the content is taller than the actual sort of field object, then we need to add a scroll bar. So we say if the formatted height of field film list is greater than the height of field film list, then and so if it is too tall, then what we want to do is we want to turn on the scroll bar. So we set the V scroll bar of field film list to true. Otherwise, we'll set it to false. So this just sort of gives us an automatic scroll bar. So the scroll bar will only show if it needs to. So let's check that first. So go into browse mode and just go to the recent and come back, and you'll see that now we have a scroll bar. And also I can see that it doesn't quite fit so nicely with that. So I'm going to go to the tab stops and I'm going to set the tab stop to 190. So my scroll bar is now not going over the edge of my dates there. Okay, so now we have to think about what we want to do on mobile. So on mobile, we won't bother doing this check first because the scroll bar will actually take care of that for us. If it doesn't need to scroll, then it won't show. So what we need to do is we need to work out two things. We need the scroller rect and the content rect. So the scroller rect is just the same as the rect of the field, so that's like the area of the control, and the content rect is similar to what we did here with the formatted height. So the content rect is the rect of the full content of the field, whereas the scroller rect, the actual area the scroller will take up, will be the same as our field. So we're going to have two variables, tscroller rect and tcontent rect. And so tscroller rect will just be the same as the rect of our field, so we'll put the rect of field film list into tscroller rect. And then we need to work out the content rect. So we'll put, so if you remember, a rect is always left, top, right, bottom. So it's the left of field film list, then comma the top of field film list, then the right of field film list. And the only one in this case, because we're only scrolling vertically, that will actually be different, is working out what the bottom is. So in this case, it won't just be the bottom of the field, because that won't give us any room to scroll, but it'll be the top of field film list plus the formatted height of field film list. And we want to put that into ContentRect. So these two rects are very similar, it's just that the bottom of the ContentRect is lower down than the bottom of the scroller rect because the content is taller than the space allowed for the scroller. So now we've got our two rects. What we want to do is we want to actually create our mobile scroller. So we say mobile control create, and then we tell it what type of control we want to create, which in this case is a scroller. And we give that scroller a name, so we're going to call that list scroller. And we'll use this name to refer to it. And now what we need to do is we need to set some properties of that scroller. So the first thing we need to do is set the rect. So we say mobile control set, and then we give it the name of the control that we want to set the property on. So in this case it's our list scroller. Then we give it the name of the property that we want to set. So the first one is the rect, and then we give it the value, which is tscroller rect. So this will set up the rect of our scroller. So this is the actual area that the scroller will take up. We then want to set content rect. So this is telling the scroller the size of the content that it is to represent. And that will be the content rect that we just worked out. And then we've got some other properties that we want to set. So the next one we want to set is we want to make sure that it's visible. So we set it the visible to true. Then we want to ensure that scrolling is enabled. So again, here the property is scrolling enabled. We want that to be true. We want to show an indicator, so a scrolling indicator, so the V indicator. We also want that to be true. You can scroll, you could choose to have something that you can scroll without the indicator, in which case you just set the indicator to false, but as long as scrolling enabled is true, then it can still scroll. And finally, we want to set the V scroll to 0. So that's the amount that it has been scrolled at the start. So when it's created, we want it not to be scrolled at all. So we set the V scroll to 0. Now there's lots of properties you can set on mobile controls. Just have a look in the dictionary at mobile control set, and that lists all the properties that you can create. Okay, so that's all we need to do to set up our scroller. We're basically just telling it what area the scroller is to take up, the size of the content it's to scroll, and in this case we want it to be visible, we want the scrolling enabled to be true, we want to show an indicator, and we want to start it off as not being scrolled at all. Now, as always, when we close the card, we want to delete any mobile controls that we've created. So on close card. Now we need to remember to do this because mobile controls don't actually belong to a card. So when you change cards, if you don't delete them, the mobile controls will remain. So we'll check if we're on mobile. So we say if the environment is mobile. And all we want to do here is mobile control delete. And then we want to give it the name of our control, which is list scroller. And the final step is to allow the scroller to actually scroll. So what we want to do is we want to move the contents. We actually want to scroll the field when the mobile scroller, which sits on the top, scrolls. And to do that, we handle the scroller did scroll message. So we say on scroller did scroll. And it gets two parameters, the h offset and the v offset. Now we're only interested in the vertical offset, but if you had a horizontal scroller, you would use the h offset. And what we want to do is we want to set the v scroll. So this is the scroll amount of our field, film list, to pv offset. So this tells us how much the scroller has been scrolled by, and then we have to manually make a change to the control here. And this is because the scroller sits on the top, so the scroller doesn't contain the content in the same way that this field contains content and the scroll bar controls it. It just sits on top, so we still have to handle the scroller did scroll message and actually move the content ourselves. But in this case, because it's a field, all we need to do is set the v-scroll of our field to the amount that it has been scrolled by. And before we move on, I just realised that when we're on mobile, we always want the scroll bar of the fields to be off. So I'm in pre-open card, I'm in the mobile section, and just before we do anything else, I'm going to set the v scroll bar of field film list to false. Because if we're on mobile, we don't want to see the scroll bar and see the mobile scroller. It could get confusing. So on mobile, we just always want to make sure that the scroll bar of the actual field itself is off, and we'll just test that. Okay, so here's our app. We'll go to the all reviews. You'll see there's no scroll bar, but if I use my mouse, or you would use your finger if you're on an actual mobile device, you'll see it's not particularly clear here because we've got quite a dark background, but you'll see that a scroll bar does show and the field is scrolled in keeping with the movement of the scroll bar. So that's how you create a mobile scroll bar.
Very clever. There you go.
Okay, so hopefully that was useful and I managed to explain it clearly enough. So there's a couple of questions here. So the first one is, how do you know that the scroll bar needed to move to 190? So this is when I was looking at the list of all of the reviews, and I noticed that when we added a scroll bar, it sort of overlapped the date a little bit. So that's just one property of the field, which is the tab stops, which just tells the field how much space to leave between, if you've got a tab in between your objects. And it was set to 200, which was a bit high, so I tried 190 and that was okay. You could work it out, you could have a look at the actual width of the field, which I think in ours is probably 320. I think the size of the stack is 320. So you could decide where you wanted that tab stop to be. But I just saw that 200 was a bit high, put it down to 190, and that looked okay. So you could do it, you could work it out sort of mathematically, or you could just do what I did, which is just try another number and it looked all right. So just a bit lower, so it's just, if you make the tab stop less, the items get closer together, which means they move over to the left, which means there was enough space for the scroll bar. And then Terry's suggested that you could do a bit of what I did in a couple of lines. So I did my, if the formatted height of field film list is greater than the height of field film list, then, and I put that in an if statement and then set the v scroll bar of the field to true. You could do that in one line. You could say set the v scroll bar of field film list to, and then in brackets the formatted height is greater than the height. So that would equally work. It's effectively the same thing. You're just sort of condensing those two lines into one. The reason I did it the way I did is it's just a bit more readable. So especially for a stack that we're using to, as an example, to show people how to do things, you do the check, you go, okay, so if that check's true, then I do something else. But it's equally valid and a little bit shorter, because you just have one line in there. So it's really, that's a choice, just what works better for you. I mean, a lot of people might actually find that more readable rather than doing the check and then inside the if statement setting the property. They're both equally valid and they work the same. So whatever you find easier and more useful and faster for yourself to type. Okay, so that is that.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Eleanor again? I think we have maybe had a bandwidth issue there. Are you there now? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, you froze there for a moment. Carry on.
So we looked at 3 types of pickers. So we did the date picker, the photo picker, and the just sort of standard picker. If you want to see what other types of pickers there are, you can just, if you look up mobile pick in the dictionary, then you'll see all the types of mobile picker there are. There's media pickers and other types of pickers. And also even the ones that we looked at have a lot of options that we didn't necessarily make use of. So the date picker, for example, you can tell it to choose just a date, which is what we did, or just a time, or a date and time. So there's all different options that you can use with the mobile pickers that we've looked at. The same with the photo picker. You can have somebody, you can get the photo picker to actually use the camera. So you do mobile pick photo, and then you tell it that you want it to use the camera, and then they can actually, hold up their phone and take a picture, and it'll be imported directly into the app as a new image. So yeah, take some time, have a look at all the different types of mobile pickers that there are, and they are really nice to add to particularly to mobile apps, because they're the type of pickers that people are used to using. They see them in apps all the time. So using those native pickers in the same way that using native text input controls and native players just make your app, it's a lot of work that you don't have to do because the mobile picker takes care of a lot of it for you, and also makes your apps really usable, because people are they're used to using those types of pickers. They use them in their calendar, they choose a time, they choose a date, things like that. So hopefully that'll be useful for you going forward with writing your mobile apps using mobile pickers. So we've only got one session left. So next month is the last session, so the last beginners course. And then that will be, I think it's called JSON Who, and it's about using JSON data in your app. So we will be looking at that next month. So we've got a few minutes left. So if anybody does have any questions, do pop them in the chat, and we can address them. And you can always put questions into the Slack channel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that reminds me. Yes, guys, if you haven't already joined this week's Slack channel, then this month, here it is for you. You can go and join us in the Slack channel now, and that's where we'll hang out. If you've got any questions or we didn't cover something, then come on over and we can carry on talking. So yeah. So do we have any more questions, or should we have a nice 10-minute break before the next session?
Time for a cup of coffee.
You guys can all go and get some
session in, but you might want one now. I get the feeling some people got up very early, so they might need another coffee or a cup of tea.
Yeah, that may be so. Some of those people must have got out of bed pretty early. Yeah. Dedicated people they are. All right, folks. So we will be back at 3 o'clock, and we will be back with Fadia, who is talking about teaching LiveCode to refugees, which I think is going to be really interesting. So don't forget to rejoin us in 10 minutes, and we'll see you then.
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks, Heather.